Hi, and welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. I'm here this week with Matt Kaiser. How are you, Matt?
Doing great, Don. How about yourself?
Great. Let's talk about the stories you covered on this week's ThreatTraq. First up was a story about something very unusual, which is a cross-platform rat, which is a remote access Trojan. So tell us about that and how unusual that is.
Sure. So cross-platform means that someone who writes this code has to make sure it runs on more than one operating system. And each operating system is different in the way that you tell it to do certain things, make network connections, access files. So it's a ton of work to do it for even two different operating systems. This one, SysJoker, supports Mac, Linux, and Windows. It's a lot of work. It seems that this is something that was highly targeted. We don't have the details on who they went after, but someone with a lot of time and resources spent a lot of time and resources to do this.
So how dangerous is it, and how do people protect themselves from it?
So most people don't have to worry about this. This was highly targeted, and if you were a victim of this, you've probably been notified by somebody already. The question about how dangerous it is, it's hard to answer. The malware itself did not have a lot of functionality that would be considered super malicious. It was meant to get other payloads onto the platform. So we don't really know what those other payloads were, but by itself, it's a decent enough rat for what it needs to be. I wouldn't say it's world class. The very interesting thing about it is that it is multi-platform, but on its own, it doesn't have a lot of attack capability built into it.
Now, Jim brought us a story about how security researchers have gathered information on vulnerabilities in kernel drivers, which is a prized target for bad actors. Tell me about it.
Sure thing. So attackers for a long time have been trying to use drivers as a way to get elevated access to a system. Basically, drivers run constantly. They often run with elevated privileges. Sometimes these are, user space drivers, which means they run sort of like a user, maybe a little more elevated. But kernel drivers are core to the operating system. There's something that if you manage to get your code running in that context, you're running elevated, you're running with extra privileges that the operating system typically reserves for special functions. So there's a lot of ways that in this article, they go into, these are specific things about kernel drivers or the different processors and the features of it. In fact, it goes in fairly deep into a lot of technical details. There's no really easy way to gloss over them here without sort of misrepresenting them. I'd say if you're someone who really likes a technical read or wants to learn more about kernel drivers and the different attacks, go for it. If not, skim it. I would say it's more of a heavy read this time around.
And finally, Jim brought us another story about a ransomware attack on a hospital in Florida. We've heard about ransomware attacks on hospitals before, but in this case, both how the hospital reacted and how they were prepared made all the difference. Tell me about it.
Exactly. So in this case, the hospital had a very attentive IT staff who took action immediately and turned off systems to prevent the spread of the ransomware. Now, this is typically a difficult decision to make because turning off the systems means that you lose the functionality of the system, immediately. It's gone. The good thing is that these folks seem to have prepared for it, for operating in a situation where they did not have access to their own charts, which was the system that was turned off, and they had to operate in sort of a limited capacity using pencil and paper or other methods to do their job. The good thing is they were prepared for it. The worst thing that can happen in terms of responding to an incident where you've got to make a decision like this is to try and make the decision on the fly without having done your research and major preparations. And then you've got people, who have competing interests and say, we absolutely can't turn this off. We've only got the one thing. Now, if you've got backups, if you've got procedures in place and you know what needs to get done, it's a much easier decision to make. And thankfully, it sounds like that hospital had a plan for dealing with a situation like this. It may not have been specifically ransomware, but to operate, at a reduced capacity because their IT systems weren't available to them, that's the foundation. If you've got that, you can already keep doing business while people sort out the technical portions of it. So that's great. And I would say this is probably a case study in how to do it right. Have everything planned beforehand so that in the heat of the moment, you don't have to come up with it. You don't have to deal with all of the different factors that confound this and make this a harder decision.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you all for watching. To keep up with great insight like this every week, please like and subscribe below. And if you want to take a deeper look at any of these stories, you can click on them and watch them in their entirety. And we'll see you next time.